I remember I couldn't access a lot of emotions because as a comedian, I'll always joke things off, brush things off. I can't even take a compliment, you know. And then I remember she was like, you know what, Jimmy, I can't help you. You got to go see a therapist. And that's what I did. Like, you know, I had to open myself up as a vulnerable human being.
Yeah.
Because I can read all the text, I can take all the scene study classes, but I had to open myself up instead of just joking everything off. And once that door opened for me, I was like, okay, now I know I can do it. I'm a full human.
Jimmy, tell me a little bit about sort of how you first became aware of this project. Obviously, Charles, you a National Book Award winning novel.
Yeah.
Had you read the novel? Like, how did it sort of come to you?
I can't read, so that was, no. You know, I first read the script, actually, and just the pilot script, what you guys saw, it's very close to what the script was. Yeah. And I know Charlie spent a long time on that, and it was like one of the best written pilot scripts. And I was like, you know, as an actor, I'm like, man, I get to do drama. I get to still be funny in it. And I get to do martial arts. I'm in, you know, selfishly in that sense. And then I went and read the book. Yeah. And truthfully, I'm not the fastest book reader. I get distracted quite a lot. Read it in like one sitting. And I was like, wow, this really like resonated and really spoke to me because, you know, Willis was a background actor and a generic Asian man. And then, you know, he grows into a bigger role. And I'm like, that is something I can truly relate to as an Asian American and also an actor in the industry. So I was like, wow. Like when I feel like really passionate about something, I think that's when it works. Yeah. When it's something like a job and my agent tells me like, hey, you should go for this. This is good for you. That never works for me. You know, like when you're like really like pretending to like something. Yeah. But this I really felt connected to and like passionate about. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about sort of how you related to Willis and then how that sort of like helped you into the character when you started prepping to actually put it up on screen.
Yeah, I think a lot of Willis's journey, it's like the metaphor of what being an Asian American is, right? Like often in the background, invisible while black and white shines on screen and you just like this minuscule part that society forgets about. But at the same time, I think as an actor in the industry, like I was a background actor, you know. I used to call central casting and I couldn't even get a call back. Like that's how sad it was, you know, because I wasn't like, I used to, like when I graduated from college, I had like really long hair, you know, and I think if you're a background, you know, Asian guy, they were looking for like a generic Asian guy. You had to brand yourself almost as a generic Asian guy. So like as an actor with long hair, they couldn't put a finger. They're like, is that a stoner Asian guy? Is that like, what is that? We don't know. So I remember the moment I cut my hair to like shorter and like I put my glasses on, then I started getting some calls back on like commercials, on background roles, whatever, which in hindsight was kind of sad. Like we couldn't be just individuals, right? We got to just put ourselves in a box. And I think that's a journey that Willis has gone through and is almost in a Truman Show way coming to sentient about. Yeah. You know, like he doesn't even know he was trapped in the background and he's slowly trying to learn what's happening and trying to break out of that, you know, because each step seems so unlikely. And I think that's my journey too. Like when I started doing stand-up, when I did background roles, when I did commercials, when I did 2 lines on Two Broke Girls, whatever, it all seemed like such life-changing, such a win, you know, and each of these moments informed the next, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of the audience knows you from comedy, Silicon Valley, or stand-up. So I was wondering, you know, how this role sort of, obviously there are very funny parts of this, but like also how this role sort of tested your dramatic chops.
You know, I've always told people I can do this, and nobody believed me. And I was like, come on, go watch Patriots Day, go watch whatever. Yeah. And I think, you know, maybe this is my love for comedians. Yeah. I think a good comedian, you have to be vulnerable and you have to be relatable. Like the funniest jokes on stage is when an audience are like, oh my God, that's so true. Yeah. My dad does this, or like I do this, you know, my girlfriend, my wife does this. And once I got to that point of my career in comedy, I was like, this is it. This is the vulnerability. This is the relatability that's very similar to being a good vulnerable actor. You know, I remember one of my first acting coaches, Marjorie Ballantyne, great. She studied under Stella Adler, and she was quite, strict and quite blunt, probably like Stella was, and I remember I couldn't access a lot of emotions because as a comedian, I'll always joke things off, brush things off. I can't even take a compliment, And then I remember she was like, you know what, Jimmy, I can't help you. You got to go see a therapist. And that's what I did. Like, I had to open myself up as a vulnerable human being.
Yeah.
Because I can read all the text, I can take all the scene study classes, but I had to open myself up instead of just joking everything off. And once that door opened for me, I was like, okay, now I know I can do it. I'm a full human.
Yeah. I was wondering how you approached the sort of the meta elements of the shows because we start out and it feels very sort of conversational, and then we go into this moment where we get the voiceover. We start to see how the show is going to be playing with all these elements. So how did you approach that as an actor?
The show gets even like crazier. Like it was a blessing to have Charlie, the book writer, to be the showrunner. I mean, that is so rare. Like that's like if George R.R. Martin ran Game of Thrones every day. That's like, I mean, he's a genius, truly, Charlie, and George. But I think, as an actor, especially Willis, he's kind of like the audience's point of view. Sometimes he doesn't know what's going on. He's lost. He's finding out stuff for the first time, just like the audience is. So it's actually very welcoming, and it's okay for me to not know every piece of information. Like use that. Right? Like they always say, if you got an argument at home and then you show up on set, use that. Like, so that's for me, if I have any confusion or whatever, sometimes I don't want the answer. I want to use it because that's what Willis is going through. And I think what kept me grounded is just to work as an actor. Like you focus on your relationships. Like Willis, although he's in this very weird world, he has a parent, a dad that he has a very strained relationship with, a mom that he's helping get over the brother in grief. He has a best friend that he sometimes want to see eye to eye with, and then a crush on a detective. These are all things we can relate to as human beings, and as long as I can kind of ground that, scene by scene, moment to moment, that's how I, just got through the day's work.
So you were thinking at all about sort of, in the scene where, you're meeting Chloe's character, like, were you thinking at all about sort of, okay, she's acting in this sort of version of a Law and Order type show? Like, were you thinking about that at all in the process of sort of your acting?
That's a great question. I think I try to read the scripts in different ways every time. Like the first time, it's like I'm trying to understand it as a storyteller. And then I'm trying to understand it in the voice of my character. What's Willis thinking? Willis is not thinking those things, right? Willis is not thinking about, oh, she just came from this show and like that makes sense and that doesn't. Willis is just focusing on, this is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and I have a crush on her and I'm a fan of hers. She's on a TV show that I wish I was on. So, of course, you can substitute whatever that is or just kind of live in the moment. It's not hard when it's Chloe Bennett. You know what I mean? Like, I was a fan of hers, and she is, like, incredibly stunning when you see her. So you use some of that. But, yeah, I think you try to have an understanding of the story, but when you're, like, there in the moment, you just focus on Willis's thought process.
I was wondering what it was like sort of working on the pilot with Taika Waititi.
He's amazing. Like, no, truly, I'm not like, I think there are so many directors, especially on like TV, they're just like babysitters, They focus on the cameras, the coverage. And then there's a lot of directors, like indie directors that are very precious and know how to talk to actors, but doesn't know anything about the camera or whatever. And I think Taika is brilliant in all senses. He's a great actor himself, so he knows when I'm in the moment, when I'm feeling it. He knows when to push the camera closer, and give me that space and simple directions and notes that will get me there. Like the scene with my father, it seemed like a straightforward scene of a father and son argument. One note that Taika gave me was like, hey, you don't want to be here right now. You want to walk away from your father, which is so counterintuitive as an actor who wants to give a good performance, right? So once that was unlocked, and then like whatever force that was pulling him in, that was what got the emotion going. And then he knew exactly when and where to place the camera to capture that. And then at the same time, he's super funny. Like the scene when Lana comes in and I'm pretending to be a waiter, a lot of that was improvised, you know, and a lot of that was Taika behind the camera screaming lines of just saying, just say crab, just say crab meat. It will be funny. Just trust me, just say it. And I just said it, and it was hilarious. But at the same time, you see like a lot of intricate camera movements that, you know, I didn't notice, you know, but I actually watched it with the DP and our first Steadicam camera operator. Like when Willis was taking the order, they were like, hey, can we order food now? And he was like, no, it's time for a change. That shot was a really cool shot because it was a practical shot. He made the Steadicam guy bump into the dolly grip. So it seemed like the camera shook, and then it went into a smooth shot. I mean, having a director that understands the camera language, the actors' lingo, and comedy, it was very rare, and that's why he's an Oscar winner, you know?
Well, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the fight scene. How much training did you have to do sort of prior to that, and then what was it like sort of on the day?
I did like 3-4 months of like Wing Chun training, and just general like kind of getting into the mindset of martial arts, because I was never going to become, you know, Donnie Yen in 4 months, you know, right? So it's more about learning the language, understanding what it means to be a martial arts practitioner. And then, of course, there's like some stuff like the spinning kick. You know, I found out in my training, I was like, oh, I can do that. And I went up to Tiger, I'm like, can we put that in so at least I look cool? So there are like very selfish moments like that. But I think the great thing about that fight scene was, you know, it's not just like cool. It told the story, and a very unlikely story of usually when a protagonist gets into a fight scene, you expect them to win. But it really, that fight scene had an arc, right? A beginning, a middle, and an end of him doing really well and then not so good and then getting kicked out of a window. That's telling Willis's story in a haiku in a way. So that was really cool. And we shot that over 2 days. And I remember like the trainer kept telling me, he's like, you can know all the moves, you know, it's like a dance, just make sure you're in the moment or else you get punched in the face. But at the same time, it's an endurance thing. You got to do these takes over and over again. And like by like Thursday when we're done, I was so sore and exhausted. And that's something that they don't tell you in acting class.
Had you ever done stunts to that level before?
No, not that much. And I remember showing up to work Friday to shoot the me and my father scene. And that's a lot going on. But once again, you know, you use that. Willis was supposed to be beat up and exhausted. And then I was able to, you know, as a blessing, use that to inform the scene. So it's less acting for me.
I was wondering what the sort of environment, what it was like sort of being in the environment of these sets, because it is sort of like a world that is like ours, but not quite. And sort of you know, the streets feel not truly of the universe. So what was that like?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the set decoration was insane. It was so good. Like the SROs, the background of Chinatown, these single resident occupancies, where you like 10 people share one bathroom. And once you walk, sure, you do your homework, you do your backstory, whatever, right? But then when you walk in the set, you can almost smell how terrible the bathroom is. And obviously, these are all brand new constructions, but you can almost smell the piss and shit in the bathroom because visually, that's how good it was. And that really helps. So whatever bit that is, that helps. And then, you know, the lighting change and everything. Once again, it's like Willis is supposed to be almost as confused and like, what the hell is going on as everyone else. And then, you know, it almost plays like breaks the fourth wall in a way in future episodes where you see that some sets are supposed to look like sets and then some stuff is supposed to look very real. So whatever inspiration you find, you find a piece of painting that looks almost too good. You're like, I'm going to use that in the moment. But once again, it's just, I think, my job. Like every department done their job so well. My job is just to focus on Willis's relationships.
Well, I mean, speaking of relationships, your banter with Ronnie is so funny. And so I was wondering sort of what doing those scenes with him was like.
Oh, it was such a joy. I mean, I've known Ronnie since Crazy Rich Asians, and our careers very similar, and we're like brothers. I just had dinner with him last night, actually, in New York. every time you show up on set, the camaraderie is there, the chemistry is like already there, and you see how that friendship kind of evolves and grow or not, and all of that. It's almost very meta and real. At times we love each other. At times we've been doing 5 hours of press junket and we want to punch each other in the face, and that's all informative, and it's like, okay, like I can feel that. But at the end of the day, he's like a brother, and so it's like, Willis and Fatty.
Yeah, you can really feel that on screen. What was it like sort of having Charlie Wu Charlie Wu there on set, to be able to, who has written this book, who has spent so much time in this world, to be there like as a showrunner.
Yeah, no, it was such a blessing because the show does get pretty crazy, and I almost think within the 10 episodes, it almost goes beyond the book. And every character has so much to do. Fatty, I don't think was a huge character in the book. It was much expanded. My mother's character is much expanded in the show, so it's great. And he was like really collaborative, but it's cool because like me and Ronnie coming from the comedy world, we want to improvise. We're like pitching lines, stuff like that, or whatnot. And so did the other actors. But sometimes Charlie would tell you, they're like, no, you got to say this line exactly as is, because this line might unravel into something else in episode 4. So you just got to trust the process, because the scripts were coming as we were shooting, which was actually a blessing. So in a way that if Willis in episode 1 wasn't supposed to know things in episode 9, Jimmy didn't know either. Like, and it was good. I think that mentally saved me.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of like the collaborative element, like how you felt sort of you were able to shape Willis alongside of Charlie?
I think we had a lot of early conversations even before we went shooting, of how much I related to the character. And obviously Charlie didn't write Willis based on me. But there was a lot of similarities. I was background actor. I was Chinese teenager number 1. I was a tech guy on Silicon Valley for 6 years. So I think we listened to each other's stories, and the book was already written, but the scripts was evolving, and they were writing it as we're shooting. So, like, I think they took some influence from me as a person, from Ronnie's story, but that's more like a Charlie question. But at the same time, for us actors, we just trust the process,
In terms of trusting the process, but can you tell me a little bit about sort of the feeling of like wanting to improvise, wanting to like, did they, how much did they let you sort of like build your own sort of sense of humor into the character as well?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was very liberating that Ronnie is the comedic relief on this show. So I know he can be funny, in the B story or in the, story with us, whatever. So that took the pressure off my shoulder. I was just able to still, like carry my story, without trying to be funny. I never tried to be funny on this show, whereas a lot of the shows I did. So I knew I just had to be truthful. And if the scenario is funny, people laugh good. But if they don't, it's fine. Ronnie's going to be funny in the next scene, So that was very liberating in that way. And there was a lot of improvisation. And it's not just comedy, Even in later episodes, I get to work with, Lisa Gilroy, the blonde cop in Black and White. And she is one of the best improvisers in the world. And she's so good, even with just improvising on timing, right? Like that line she said, she was like, and here's Lana. Like, that she didn't add any words, but that was something that she came up with. And then Sullivan, the tall black actor in Black and White, he's like a tremendous like stage classically trained actor, and actually being able to in the later episodes play with him, that was really cool, because that was even like there's a scene where like we go into a bar. I don't want to give too much away, but he was such a good actor, and we're just on the same page and wavelength. We'll start talking in our characters before they call action, when the camera was rolling, and that really got us into the character, and we're just improvising. And none of that stuff might end up in the show, but it gets us in character. So it was really cool to get to play with everyone that came from different disciplines. Whereas me and Ronnie will have things like maybe pre-thought out, pre-written as comedians. We're like, what if we say this? That'll be funny. What if we do that? You grab this thing, whatever. But with Lisa, it might just be a brand new improvised line. With Sullivan, it might be an acting exercise. You know.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of brought me to something that I wanted to ask, which was, what do you think you sort of learned from this ensemble, sort of like, and how did sort of working with all these people sort of shape the show that we now see?
Yeah, it was such a blessing. Like Diana Lynn, who played my mother, she was like Beijing dramatic school, and she can just get to those very deep emotions and cry, not just have like lizard tears, but like real deep tears, like on the dot. You know what I mean? And each person like taught me so much. Like I think when say me and Ronnie work, it's very practical. We try to hit something. When me and Diana work, I'm just trying to stay with her. And she's staying with me. And then sometimes we'll get to places we didn't even know and expect to go. And I think as an actor, sometimes that's the most exciting thing, Same thing with Tai Ma, and everyone came from such different disciplines. It was really cool and fun to be able to play with everyone.
You sort of teased that it gets even crazier. Like, how did you handle sort of as the plot, like, shifts into high gear? Like, how did you handle that as an actor?
I was losing my mind because it was a 6 months shoot, and I was almost in every scene. But partly me losing my mind was good, because if I'm in episode 6, I'm so tired, I'm losing my shit, I don't know what's going on anymore. I'm just trying to say my lines, but that's maybe what Willis was exactly going through and in his life. So there's, you try to use the things that are parallel, but and whatever, say, friendship, relationship, or trouble with your parents, you try to use that, and that helped instead of trying to put it away and show up like I'm perfect every day. I show up fucked up a lot of days, but that's good because Willis was fucked up,
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much for being here. Everyone, thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
being
everyone.
here. We have
Really
to wrap
appreciate
up,
that.
but
Thank
this
you.
was so great.